Why don't we go ahead and move on, and we'll look at the Improving Science Gateway Monitoring caveats and goals from Jeanette. And Abe, you have another video there for us?
Hi, my name is Jeanette Sperhac, and I'm here from Center for Computational Research at University of Buffalo. And I'm here to talk to you today about Science Gateway Monitoring using our existing application, XDMod, and how we're improving it for gateways now. As science gateways become more prominent in research computing, it becomes more important to understand who uses them and how. So I will outline some new gateways monitoring functionality we're adding to this existing tool. XDMod is an NSF-funded tool that collects and presents detailed data about computing resources. We developed it to help us manage our own computational resources at Center for Computational Research, and for 10 years the tool has been used to monitor NSF's XSEED portfolio. It's also available in an open source version for monitoring any computing resource. XDMod gathers data from various sources. For instance, accounting information about HPC jobs from resource managers, and virtual machine provisioning data from cloud computing platforms. These are all collected and aggregated together in the XDMod data warehouse. And then, from there, users can plot the metrics on accounting and performance data for their computational jobs. So what about gateway users and administrators? In previous versions of the tool, we were a little light on gateway-specific information, though there was some available, and some of it was obscured. Since high-level gateways monitoring is important to ensure access to gateways and to plan for future acquisition, we are presently developing some enhancements to put gateway jobs on a more equal footing with other computational jobs in XDMod. So science gateways are usually portals to computing resources. They offer web-based user interfaces with curated applications for specific research communities, and they allow users to easily utilize high-performance cloud computing. The use of gateways has increased substantially for submission of HPC jobs. As you can see in this figure, gateways submitted 5 times more jobs. These blue bars are job counts on XSEED resources, 5 times more jobs in 2019 than in 2015. That's on XSEED resources. So there's a price to be paid for this simplicity and this ease of use and its complexity. Science gateways help to make computing accessible, but they do this with the cost of that complexity under the covers. They're having to communicate with remote resources, stage and transfer data, queue computations, collect output, and so forth. So let's look at a specific example. The iTASR tool on the ZhangLab gateway is used for predicting protein structure and function. A very simple example of what this workflow does is it starts with the user inputting an amino acid sequence such as this fragment here. There's a lot of computation that occurs, and a modeled structure in 3D is proposed for this protein, and then biological function is inferred. This is pretty important. It can be used and has been used to model all the proteins produced by the COVID-19 genome, for instance. Now, behind the scenes, there's a lot of computational biology taking place. As you can see here, we've got a lot of things happening, such as threading and clustering algorithms, database searches, and energy minimizations. We're not concerned with this level of detail. Instead, let's back up a bit and say, here's the user's laptop. Here's the web server, which is representing the gateway itself. And this orange box is the HPC resource, in this case SDSC Comet, that is backing this gateway with computation. This is just an example of one gateway and how one of the workflows on it might work. So here's what happens. The user comes in, authenticates on the gateway, and passes in their amino acid sequence. That amino acid sequence is, the job is prepared by the gateway, submitted to the HPC resource, and then a cascade of jobs is kicked off that performs all of the different computational steps needed by this workflow. In the end, the results are returned to the user, but there are a great number of things that occur, including searches of other databases and so forth. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And again, this lends itself to the complexity. If we want to model, if we want to observe the the weight of this job, the amount of computational resources that are consumed by it, we need to collect metadata, and all that metadata is scattered around. There is transferring of data, there is queuing of computations, and collection of results. So let's talk about what is involved and what XDMod needs to be able to represent that. We need user identity metadata, job metadata, and resource metadata. Now, there's a list of this in the paper, and I emphasize that you should look there if you'd like the full list, but let's look at it in pictures. User identity metadata looks like this. The user authenticates on the web server, which is the gateway itself, and so the gateway knows the user by some name. The computing resource knows the gateway by some other name. We need both of these names and identities to be able to parse out who submitted what jobs and when it was done and so forth. It's two pieces of the metadata. Additionally, there's the job metadata. So again, the gateway has a job ID that it knows this particular workflow as, and then Comet has a series of job IDs. As we discussed earlier, there's a cascade of jobs that take place in order to perform this computation for this workflow. So the suite of these job IDs comprises what is needed in the metadata that XDMod will want. There's resource metadata also associated, so submission times, so both timestamps and zones where these times are logged, the script name, the executable name, the resource and queue names. All of these things need to be collected so that we can fully account for what this job is doing. So the whole picture looks like this. Now, as far as the XSEED resources are concerned, XSEED dictates that a certain API is used to report these pieces of information. Those go into XSEED's central database, and XDMod gets them from there. We're endeavoring now to make sure that we properly account for all those pieces of metadata and use those to build a complete picture of the job. Now, what about the open source side? Well, something else that we're doing right now in XDMod is putting together a few reference implementations for typical gateway software so that software developers and managers can put together and assemble the proper metadata to fully describe their jobs. So aside from metadata, which we've been through in detail, there are other ease of use and access challenges presented in XDMod. There are a few things we need. For example, better metrics would be really helpful. At present, we have a few kinds of metrics that we're supporting up to now on the gateways, things like job counts. But we really would like to have some things like CPU usage. We'd like to have access to gateways metrics be a little more obvious on XDMod. We've obscured it a bit, even though it's there. So we're bringing that right to the front. We're going to make it easier for gateway jobs and users to be searched for. So all of these things have already been done. Let's talk about those. First of all, we made it easier to use by rolling out user role dashboards across the board on XDMod. That's going to be especially helpful for gateway PIs, and I'll show you that in a moment. Furthermore, drill down filtering and search by gateway end user is much more in force, and we have new gateway metrics. So here's the gateway PI dashboard. I'm presently logged in as the PI for my gateway video, which is hosted at CCR. You can see here the wait hours per job for my video jobs, so the jobs that are submitted on my gateway as compared to other jobs submitted across the center. Over here, you can see a listing of all the recent jobs that were submitted by my gateway. We can see a general measure of how well they did with their CPU usage. And if I click through, I can see their detailed performance information, including time series plots. And then there's a small metric here shown in visual style with a job efficiency measure talking about the inefficient job counts my gateway has submitted lately. This is a metric that can be configured behind the scenes, but it gives me an eyeball sense of how things are going on my gateway. Similarly, we've put up dashboards of this style for Open On Demand, which itself is essentially a gateway. So these kinds of reporting can help you to manage your gateway going forward. Now, additionally, as I mentioned, we've got expanded gateway metrics. Here you can see XSEED active gateway users and total CPU hours expended by them. between 2015 and 2020. An easy plot to make now that you can see where to access and how to access these metrics on XDMod for gateways. Finally, here's another CPU hour plot. We've got a bar plot, the top 5 gateways in terms of CPU hours total consumption, first 3 quarters of this year, running only on the Comet resources. So we still have some things to do for XDMod and gateways. There are some ways in which we want to improve access for the end users. For example, we're working now on drilling down to gateway job performance data right out of the metrics. We're thinking about how to provide access by gateway username, since usernames on XDMod and usernames on gateways are not inherently tied to one another. We're trying to come up with a way to make this possible so that gateway users can ultimately have access to their own job details. And furthermore, as I mentioned, we're working hard to make sure that we're accounting properly for the metadata that we get either from XDMod and then also to provide reference implementations so that the typical gateway software will and users of it can know how to report their metadata and get it into XDMod. So I want to thank the XDMod team who's worked so hard on all of this functionality and plenty of other features. We'd like to thank the NSF for supporting this project. And finally, this is where you can find us out in the world. OpenXDMod documentation if you would like to run it at your own center. open.xdmod.org. You can find source code, support, documentation, and so forth. The XDMod version of this software is here. There's a publicly accessible interface, as well as if you are an XDMod member, you can sign in and see more details. And finally, you can drop us a line here. Thank you so much for your attention. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jeanette, for the presentation. I know I see at least one question from Dave. Dave, do you want to unmute and ask your question to Jeanette?
Sure. Hi, Jeanette. It was a great presentation. Thank you. Any thoughts on reporting statistics from the gateway itself? Total number of logins, simultaneous logins, things that might help the gateway developer understand what parts of the gateway need to be improved.
Certainly, that is another thing that we have been considering, and we don't have any concrete plans for it just now. But that's certainly an issue for gateways, and deciding how to allocate your development time and resources. Right, when you're running a gateway, you want to know who's using these things and who's getting in there. I think most gateways collect this kind of statistics in one way or another. Certainly, you can go through your web server logs and so forth. But I agree that it would be of great interest to really kind of formalize this and make it possible to gather that information and present it in a metrics in metrics that can be explored in a tool. So I agree. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jeanette.
So other questions for Jeanette?
I neglected to mention that it's release 9 that is being discussed in the talk, and so the XDMod version of that is coming out next month.
Very good, very good. Other questions? If not, I will ask one here. So gathering metadata about jobs is useful. You've been doing it for this sole purpose of accounting, it sounds like, for that monitoring and accounting, but metadata on jobs and workflows is also useful in the general area of fair and fair data and reproducibility. Is the data that is used for monitoring and collecting these accounting type metrics, is that available in other forms and sources for other purposes, which I'll talk tomorrow about fair data and gateways, but it seems like there's quite a bit of overlap there.
So in other words, can researchers access these data and use them for their own analyses? Is this open to the public? Is that what you mean?
Sure.
Because we have done, yeah. So we have, I believe, on the order of a year ago, we first released an implementation of some functionality that allows people to go in and download different data sets. Now, to some degree, there are a couple things that are a little sensitive, so we have made them harder to get to. Yeah, things like the performance details of individual jobs, but general usage and job accounting information is available to anyone who wishes to download it. So, and that is a matter of interest for researchers. I agree.
Yeah, and as I said, there's also an aspect of provenance hidden in that monitoring data, right? So where it was done, what type of processors, what type of workflow it was done,
Absolutely,
even software versions and such.
We have done a couple of the team has done a couple of full workflow analyses for different resources and for XDMod itself. So this is really it is something that you can learn a lot by looking into those data.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Rob.
Very good.